Hey everyone, my name's Elliot and I'm a small animal veterinarian in England. I wanted to make a video on calculating CRIs, commonly called continuous or constant rate infusions. They're a fairly straightforward thing to do, but they can be a bit daunting in the beginning if you don't have much experience with them. There are a couple of different calculators and other things to do this, but I really feel if you have a good grasp of the basics, then it doesn't matter what medication you're using, how you're administering it, you can recalculate them every time. Um, I assume if you've come to this video that you already know what a CRI is and what you could use it for, but just in case you don't, it's just a different method of delivering medication. So rather than giving an injection every 4, 6, 8 hours, whatever, you're giving it constantly. So you have less peaks and troughs and you have a bit more ability to titrate and manipulate that medication. So there are a couple of ways that you can do it, but everything starts here with your weights and your measures. So there are 1,000 milligrams in a gram, and there are 1,000 micrograms in a milligram. So the reason I bring this up is sometimes medications will be listed as milligrams per kilogram per hour, or micrograms per kilogram per hour, or even per minute. So you need to be really careful that you don't get these two guys mixed up, because if you do, you've got an order of 1,000, and that can be a pretty big overdose or underdose. Now, microgram is commonly written with a mu, so mugram like that, or written out as the mcg, or just written as microgram. It all depends on the literature you're using, and there's 1,000 mils in a litre, where you will never go down to microliters. Now we've got two approaches to doing this. We've got a custom approach and sort of a cheat sheet, quick and easy approach. The custom approach is nice because you can use it for anything. It doesn't matter how fast you're administering the fluid, what medications you're giving, multiple medications, etc. Then you can use that to get to the end result. The quick and easy can be nice in emergencies, or if you're using the same medication very frequently, and you're using bigger patients, but we'll get to that at the end. So I think the best way to do this is just start out with an example. So one medication that's used really commonly is metoclopramide, usually used in patients with gastrointestinal issues. So the couple of bits of information that you really need, first of all, is the medication, which is metoclopramide, and the dose, which in this drug is commonly 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram per day. So not per hour, not per minute, but per day. You need to know how much your patient weighs. So for ease sake, we'll say we're about 10 kilos. And finally, you need to know how quickly you're going to administer this fluid. So are you going to give it in the regular IV fluids that the patient is receiving, in which case, whatever dose you have them on, that's what it's going to be. So whether it's 20, 30, 40 mils an hour, or are you going to deliver this as a separate infusion, either by a second character or via a Y connector or piggybacking or whatever you want to do. So I think for ease of titration and everything else, it will be easier to deliver it through a second port or a second IV rather than putting it into the maintenance fluids. So if you're using a syringe driver, those guys, if they're well calibrated, are very reliable, but if you haven't been calibrating it for some time, then you might run into some trouble. You probably want to go with maybe a higher rate of fluid. So I like to do anywhere between 1 to 5 mils per hour. So let's say for here now we're doing 5 mils per hour, or you can pick mils per kilo per hour. The choice is really yours, and that's the nice thing about this method. So we have all of our info there. What do we need to figure out? We need to figure out how much drug is going in fluids, and how fast are we going to give it. We know 5 mils per hour, and how we going to practically do this. So first thing we need to figure out, one, how many milligrams per kilo per day are we going to be giving. So let's say we're going with 1 mil per kilo per day, 1 mg per kilo per day, sorry. So most of you probably do this in your head or with a calculator. and skip all these steps, but just because we have the chance here, I'll go ahead and write it out a long way. So we got 1 mg per kg per day times 10 kilos, kilograms, cross out, and we're left with 10 milligrams per day. Not super helpful because we're trying to go by hour, so we need to divide that out into 24 hours a day, and we know that one day has 24 hours. So our days are going to cross out, and we're left with 0.42 milligrams per hour. Again, not the most helpful bit of information because we're trying to pull up volume into a syringe and give it to our patient, or put it in a fluid bag, or whatever you want to do. So the next thing you need to know is the concentration of your drug. I think imiprid, the more commonly used label metoclopramide, is 1 milligram per mil. For argument's sake, we'll say it is. Now, I'm sure all of you have calculated out volume from milligrams. All we're doing is taking our milligrams and dividing by the concentration. So we're putting that over there, and we're saying 1 milligram per mil. Crossing out our milligrams again, leaving us with 0.42 mils per hour. Brill. Now, if you wanted, you could just pull up this medication into a syringe, put it in at 0.4 mils per hour on a syringe driver, and you would probably be fine. Again, if it's calibrated well, it should deliver accurately. However, if you wanted to go and administer it at 5 mils an hour for whatever reason, then we need to do a bit more math. So we know that we're going to deliver. Let's move you up a bit. We know that we're going to deliver 5 mils an hour. So every one of those 5 mils must contain 0.42 mils of metoclopramide. So we simply do 5 mil minus 0.42 mils. I mean, for argument's sake, we could probably just round it to 0.4 mils, and we're left with 4.6 mil. So all we're going to do is get a syringe. We're going to pull up 4.6 mils of saline or Hartmann's or whatever you want to administer, plus 0.4 mils of metoclopramide. If you've got a 10 mil syringe or a 50 mil syringe or a 60 mil syringe, then all you have to do is divide each one of those by that number. So 4.6 mils times 10 is 46, and then 0.4 mils times 10 is 4. So you've got 46 mils of saline plus 4 mils of metoclopramide in a syringe. So, I mean, this maybe seems like a convoluted way to do it, but it's incredibly flexible, and if you remember your bits of information that you need, then you're able to get there every time. So we started with our medication here, our dose here, our weight, and our mils per hour. We just figured out, based on the dose, how much is the patient getting a day. So we've got 1 mg per kg per day, so they're getting 10 mgs per kg per day. We figured out over the day there's 24 hours, so 10 milligrams delivered per day divided by 24 gives us 0.42 milligrams per hour. We converted that to volume by dividing by concentration here, and we ended up with 0.42 mils per hour. And again, we could stop here if we want and just deliver it, especially if you've got a larger volume or a less concentrated medication. But for most of them, to get a good rate of flow, you're going to have to dilute them out. So we just figured out how many mils we're delivering to the patient per hour, and we just diluted it out quite simply. So moving on to another example. Okay. So another drug that's used commonly, especially for things like surgeries and really painful conditions, is fentanyl. Now, this is a great example drug because it's a total pain in the ass to calculate sometimes because the listed doses in formularies is 0.02 to 0.06 micrograms per kilogram per minute. Again, go with our good 10 kilo dog. And I think for this, we will perhaps try and pick a nice even number, let's say 6 mils per hour. So, same as before, we need to figure out how much medication, how we're going to dilute, and how we're going to give it. So, there's a pretty wide dose range. I generally start about the 0.03 mics per kilo per minute. So if we go here and we got 0.03 micrograms per kilo per minute times our 10 kilo dog or very fat cat, I'm going to end up with 0.3 micrograms per minute. Now, generally we don't do things per minute, and I'm still not entirely sure why this is listed this way, because it's not the easiest, and it just makes you have to do more steps. So we need to calculate this to, or convert this to hours. So we have 0.3 micrograms per minute times 60 minutes per hour. Our minutes cross out, and we are left with 18 micrograms per hour. Now, generally, fentanyl is listed in micrograms per mil on the bottle, so we could convert to milligrams by multiplying by 1000, but there's no need to at this point because our fentanyl concentration generally, I think, is 50 micrograms per mil. So what we're going to do is convert to volume of fentanyl by taking our 18 micrograms per hour, doing our conversion by concentration. So we know that in every bottle there are 50 micrograms per mil of fentanyl. Our units are going to cancel out again, so we're going to do 18 divided by 50. We're going to end up with 0.36 mils per hour. Now again, we can stop here, you can round up a little bit, and we can end up with just a straight fentanyl in a syringe driver. It depends on how accurate yours is. I think the most accurate one I've seen just does it down to the tenths, so you could either do 0.3 or 0.4 and go from there. Again, it's a fairly flexible medication. However, if you wanted to be a bit more precise, then again, we're going to get our good friend saline. We're giving it at 6 mils an hour. We're just going to take 6 mils minus 0.36 mils, and we're going to end up with 5.64 mils of saline for every 0.36 mils of fentanyl. You're just going to mix those two together and put them in at 6 mils an hour. Now, the nice thing about this is we chose an even number, because if you want to half the dose down, then you just drop it down to 3. You could have started with 5. It's not a big deal, but you know that you're maxing your dose out at about 12 per hour. So you've got a nice, easy way to step this medication up or down. If you want to add in other medications, so let's say you're adding in something like ketamine or lidocaine to the mix, then really you're just going to be subtracting that volume from this here. So you've got your mix here, and you've got your amount of saline that you're throwing in there. So you go through all this calculation again with the ketamine or the lidocaine, and you would just subtract the volume from there. So if you're giving, let's say, 0.2 mils per hour of ketamine on top, then you would subtract that down to 5.44 mils of saline, and you'd have 0.2 mils of ketamine, just to keep the ratios equal. And again, you just multiply that out by the size of the syringe you have. So if you've got a 60 ml syringe, we're starting with 6 mils an hour. So we're just going to multiply everything by 10, and you're going to end up with about 54 saline, 3.6 fentanyl, and 2 of ketamine. Again, there's room for precision, there's room for error here, so don't feel like you have to spend hours trying to get the syringe exactly right, because we're dealing with living systems and it's going to be fairly variable. So there's that. Last but not least is our cheeky method, just like it says on the screen. So this will give you sort of a flat delivery. It doesn't work as well for tiny patients. So if you've got smaller dogs or cats, then you can actually end up giving them some fairly high rates of fluid. So if you follow the steps, you're going to take 60 milligrams of your drug, you're going to add it to a liter of fluid. When you do that, your flow rate in mils per kilo per hour is equal to your delivery rate in micrograms per kilo per minute. So it's a bit unusual. You're going from hours to minutes, so you need to keep that straight in your head. But if you're trying to set up a dopamine CRI or something fairly quickly, then you're simply going to add 60 milligrams of dopamine to 1 liter. But if you've got smaller bags, then you can do 30 milligrams in 500 mil, and so on and so on. Or 15. If you're special enough to have those nice 250 bags, then you can add 15 mils in 250. So if you're trying to run dopamine at 5 micrograms per kilo per minute, then you're simply going to add your 60 milligrams into the bag of 1 liter, and you're going to run it at 5 mils an hour. So 5 mils per kilo per hour is the same as the number of micrograms per kilo per minute. So it's quick and easy, but it's not very flexible. It doesn't really let you adjust the rate. And if you're using medications that require high concentrations hourly, the fluid rate you have to deliver is quite high. So that's about it. I think the important things to remember are try and remember your basics. So you need to know your drug, you need to know your dose, you need to know your patient weight, you need to know your flow rate of the fluids that you're giving it in. Went from 3 to 5 there, obviously doing lots of good maths today. And you need to know your concentration of your drug. If you have all of this information, you can get to the end, and you can quite reliably use a new tool that is really, really helpful in general practice, even if you think this is not something you're going to use very often. There's old patients that come in, if they're really painful, you want to throw a bit of ketamine or a bit of lidocaine. If you don't have fentanyl, or some fentanyl into the mix, you can make a big difference. Even things like midazolam CRIs for patients with seizures, or propofol CRIs. Your possibilities are endless. So I hope this video has been helpful. Sorry if I droned on for so long, but if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, then please comment below, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you. And as a final note on calculators, if you want some good CRI calculators, you can go to www.vasg.org. That's the Veterinary Analgesia and Anesthesia Support Group. As a word of warning, if you are ever going to download a commercial calculator or a pre-done calculator, the only person who is ultimately responsible for the drugs that you deliver is you. So make sure you double check and verify that calculator to make sure it's spitting out the right info before you commit to using it. Otherwise, once you have, they're a really handy tool. Helps avoid all this math and this mess. But again, I feel that you should have a good understanding of how these are calculated before you go and use a commercial calculator. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and have a good one.